Marks about 7 to maybe 8 minutes, maybe longer. And here right now, live from the Oval Office, President Donald Trump.
My fellow Americans, tonight I am speaking to you because there is a growing humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border. Every resources and drives down jobs and wages. Among those hardest hit, 300 of our citizens are killed by heroin alone, 90% of which floods across from our southern border. More Americans will die from drugs this year than were killed in the entire Vietnam War. In the last 2 years, ICE officers made 266,000 arrests of aliens with criminal records, including those charged or convicted of 100,000 assaults, 30,000 sex crimes, and 4,000 violent killings. Over the years, thousands of Americans have been brutally killed by those who illegally entered our country, and thousands more lives will be lost if we don't act right now. This is a humanitarian crisis, a crisis of the heart, and a crisis of the soul. Last month, 20,000 migrant children were illegally brought into the United States, a dramatic increase. These children are used as human pawns by vicious coyotes and ruthless gangs. 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted on the dangerous trek up through Mexico. Women and children are the biggest victims, by far, of our broken system. This is the tragic reality of illegal immigration on our southern border. This is the cycle of human suffering that I am determined to end. My administration has presented Congress with a detailed proposal to secure the border and stop the criminal gangs, drug smugglers, and human traffickers. It's a tremendous problem. Our proposal was developed by law enforcement professionals and border agents at the Department of Homeland Security. These are the resources they have requested to properly perform their mission and keep America safe, in fact, safer than ever before. The proposal from Homeland Security includes cutting-edge technology for detecting drugs, weapons, illegal contraband, and many other things. We have requested more agents, immigration judges, and bed space to process the sharp rise in unlawful migration fueled by our very strong economy. Our plan also contains an urgent request for humanitarian assistance and medical support. Furthermore, we have asked Congress to close border security loopholes so that illegal immigrant children can be safely and humanely returned back home. Finally, as part of an overall approach to border security, law enforcement professionals have requested $5.7 billion for a physical barrier. At the request of Democrats, it will be a steel barrier rather than a concrete wall. This barrier is absolutely critical to border security. It's also what our professionals at the border want and need. This is just common sense. The border wall would very quickly pay for itself. The cost of illegal drugs exceeds $500 billion a year, vastly more than the $5.7 billion we have requested from Congress. The wall will also be paid for indirectly by the great new trade deal we have made with Mexico. Senator Chuck Schumer, who you will be hearing from later tonight, has repeatedly supported a physical barrier in the past, along with many other Democrats. They changed their mind only after I was elected president. Democrats in Congress have refused to acknowledge the crisis, and they have refused to provide our brave border agents with the tools they desperately need to protect our families and our nation. The federal government remains shut down for one reason, and one reason only: because Democrats will not fund border security. My administration is doing everything in our power to help those impacted by the situation. But the only solution is for Democrats to pass a spending bill that defends our borders and reopens the government. This situation could be solved in a 45-minute meeting. I have invited congressional leadership to the White House tomorrow to get this done. Hopefully, we can rise above partisan politics in order to support national security. Some have suggested a barrier is immoral. Then why do wealthy politicians build walls, fences, and gates around their homes? They don't build walls because they're so horribly victimized. A young police officer in California was savagely murdered in cold blood by an illegal alien who just came across the border. The life of an American hero was stolen by someone who had no right to be in our country. Day after day, precious lives are cut short by those who have violated our borders. In California, an Air Force veteran was raped, murdered, and beaten to death with a hammer by an illegal alien with a long criminal history. In Georgia, an illegal alien was recently murdering his neighbor. In Maryland, MS-13 gang members who arrived in the United States as unaccompanied minors were arrested and charged last year after viciously stabbing and beating. Must we shed before Congress does its job? To those who refuse to compromise in the name of border security, I would ask, imagine if it was your child, your husband, or your wife, whose life was so cruelly shattered and totally broken. To every member of Congress, pass a bill that ends this crisis. To every citizen, call Congress and tell them to finally, after all of these decades, secure our border. This is a choice between right and wrong, justice and injustice. This is about whether we fulfill our sacred duty to the American citizens we serve. When I took the oath of office, I swore to protect our country, and that is what I will always do. So help me God. Thank you and good night.
All right, there you have it. There's President Donald Trump, first address to the nation there in the Oval Office. Went about 9 minutes or so. It's time to check the facts, see if he was compelling and was what he said correct. We're going to have a response from the Democratic leaders coming up. But right now, let's bring in Chief National Correspondent John King. And we have one of the best fact checkers out there, Toronto Star Washington correspondent Daniel Dale. First to you. Did he get it done?
He created a sense of crisis and urgency along the way. He also created a lot of business for the fact-check machines. The president says a wall will stop the drugs, the heroin, the fentanyl, the other opioids. Most of the drugs, his own government says, come in through legal points of entry, where there's commerce, where there's crossing. A wall will not block the legal points of entry. The president said again, the New Mexico Free Trade Agreement will indirectly pay for the wall. It's not how it works. Money created, trade deficits, trade surplus doesn't go to the United States Treasury for free spending on other programs. The president also said, this is powerful, when he talks about these heinous, unacceptable, reprehensible crimes, murders, assaults committed by people illegally in this country. No question, they're heinous and reprehensible. But the statistics show you that the crime rate among immigrants is actually lower than the crime rate among non-immigrants. So that's cherry picking and seizing and trying to create an emotional response. He also talked about the economic impact. They're taking jobs from especially African Americans and Latinos. A lot of American corporations would tell you right now, they can't find workers. They're desperate for workers, in part because of a strong economy this president should be claiming credit for. So on the one hand, he's kind of biting into his own success to make this point.
What came out to you? You were looking in the right and wrong category.
Well, you don't need me. You have John King. I thought he did a great job there. But there were a couple others. You know, he said at the Democrats' request, we will make this a steel barrier. This was not a Democratic request. This is something that Trump has claimed will satisfy Democrats. It's not going to be concrete. It's going to be steel. Nobody asked for this. Democrats' problem is not the material. It's the project. He also implicitly referred again to the Obama's house. Didn't name them, but said powerful,
people who build walls and gates outside their homes. Why do they do it?
Yes, the Obamas, of course, still have significant Secret Service protection. They do have some fencing, as their neighbors do. They do not have a giant wall around their house or compound, as Trump calls it. He also referred to children being brought over the border by nefarious people who are supposedly smuggling them in. He has never presented any good data for how common that is. The data we've seen suggests that is uncommon, that most of the cases are legitimate families legitimately seeking asylum.
The idea of having kids faked and recycled and taken by coyotes, as he says, you're laying that out in context for people. How significant is that?
Yeah, the numbers I've seen suggest that it's minimal. It's less than 1% of the family units that are encountered.
The overwhelming majority are actual family units.
Yes, or at least not determined immediately to be fraudulent.
1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted some way on the journey.
I don't know about that stat. I can't weigh in.
In terms of what was new, what was different, we did see him try to grow the argument. This is humanitarian. Did he go far enough?
That's a question where the Democrats would support much of the money there. The Democrats don't want the beds. They don't want the big camps. They think that's inhumane. But could the president have a conversation with Democrats about more border security money? Absolutely.
And we'll see what the Democrats say in rebuttal.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak directly to the American people tonight about how we can end this shutdown and meet the needs of the American people. Sadly, much of what we heard from President Trump throughout this senseless shutdown has been full of misinformation and even malice. The president has chosen fear. We want to start with the facts. The fact is, on the very first day of this Congress, House Democrats passed Senate Republican legislation to reopen government and fund smart, effective border security solutions. But the president is rejecting these bipartisan bills which would reopen government over his obsession with forcing American taxpayers to waste billions of dollars on an expensive and ineffective wall, a wall he always promised Mexico would pay for. The fact is, President Trump has chosen to hold hostage critical services for the health, safety, and well-being of the American people and withhold the paychecks of 800,000 innocent workers across the nation, many of them veterans. He promised to keep government shut down for months or years, no matter whom it hurts. That's just plain wrong. The fact is, we all agree we need to secure our borders while honoring our values. We can build the infrastructure and roads at our ports of entry. We can install new technology to scan cars and trucks for drugs coming into our nation. We can hire the personnel we need to facilitate trade and immigration at the border. We can fund more innovation to detect unauthorized crossings. The fact is, the women and children at the border are not a security threat. They are a humanitarian challenge, a challenge that President Trump's own cruel and counterproductive policies have only deepened. And the fact is, President Trump must stop holding the American people hostage, must stop manufacturing a crisis, and must reopen the government. Thank you. Leader Schumer?
Thank you, Speaker Pelosi. My fellow Americans, we address you tonight for one reason only. The President of the United States, having failed to get Mexico to pay for his ineffective, unnecessary border wall, and unable to convince the Congress or the American people to foot the bill, has shut down the government. American democracy doesn't work that way. We don't govern by temper tantrum. No president should pound the table and demand he gets his way, or else the government shuts down, hurting millions of Americans who are treated as leverage. Tonight, and throughout this debate and throughout his presidency, President Trump has appealed to fear, not facts, division, not unity. Make no mistake, Democrats and the president both want stronger border security. However, we sharply disagree with the president about the most effective way to do it. So, how do we untangle this mess? Well, there's an obvious solution. Separate the shutdown from arguments over border security. There is bipartisan legislation supported by Democrats and Republicans to reopen government while allowing debate over border security to continue. There is no excuse for hurting millions of Americans over a policy difference. Federal workers are about to miss a paycheck. Some families can't get a mortgage to buy a new home. Farmers and small businesses won't get loans they desperately need. Most presidents have used Oval Office addresses for noble purposes. This president can divert attention from the turmoil in his administration. My fellow Americans, there is no challenge so great that our nation cannot rise to meet it. We can reopen the government and continue to work through disagreements over policy. We can secure our border without an ineffective, expensive wall. And we can welcome legal immigrants and refugees without compromising safety and security. The symbol of America should be the Statue of Liberty, not a 30-foot wall. So our suggestion is a simple one. Mr. President, reopen the government and we can work to resolve our differences over border security, but end this shutdown now. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. There are the arguments from both sides. Let's get analysis here. We have John King and Daniel Dale, and now let's bring in Gloria Borger, Dana Bash, and Nia Malika Henderson. It's good to have everybody here. Welcome. Here's the first thing we know. Not the most compelling
presentation
venue from either side.
I think you're safe with your job.
You're right. So far on that level. I was at that lunch this morning with President Trump and the Vice President. The content was off the record, but I will tell you, he's much more compelling making this case in person than he was on the teleprompter tonight. That's going to matter. On the good side for him, though, John, is that they're not going to blow anybody away with their presentation either. So this comes down to who did more to assure their base that they're fighting the right fight.
But is that all this is about? That's a key part of the question. Did anybody move anybody who counts? Did the president either solidify his support? We've seen some cracks. I don't want to over-magnify them. There's just a handful right now. But some cracks among Republican senators, some cracks among Republican-leading organizations like the Chamber of Commerce saying, stop, this is starting to hurt the economy. Do what the Democrats say, essentially. Reopen the government and negotiate over the border. It's cracks. It's not. Did the president help his cause there? We'll find out as he goes to Capitol Hill tomorrow. Did the Democrats lose it? Did the president win over any Democrats or Democratic-minded voters or institutions? I think
that's
not.
really the key question, is whether or not the president could use this very important event that is supposed to be saved for big national or international events to explain to not his base, who already believes him, but the people who aren't sure what this is all about and don't really get what this is all about, explain to them and convince them, or at least let them, make them start to look at this in a different way. And that wasn't what he did. That wasn't what he did at all.
Hold on one second, because we fact-checked the president. Let's be fair on both sides. Did anything stand out to you, what we heard from Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer?
I didn't hear any factual errors. I missed about the first 30 seconds, but the rest of it, it was standard political rhetoric. And I think the thing about the president that's so different is that in these kinds of addresses that are thoroughly vetted, written by teams of speechwriters, he still will include, 5, 6, 7 misleading, dishonest claims.
But there was a different tone to me. I mean, what was interesting to me about Donald Trump tonight was the wall didn't come first, it came last. And he